Hello and welcome to Hire Automation, a podcast brought to you by Robotics. I'm your host, Michelle Dawn Mooney. Today we're talking about ASRS versus AMRs, how the robotic solutions differ and where they can collaborate. In the world of warehouse automation, it's easy to get lost in the alphabet soup of technologies. For example, automated storage and retrieval systems, or ASRS, and autonomous mobile robots, or AMRs, both aim to streamline operations, improve order picking, and enhance workflow efficiencies. Yet while they work towards similar goals, these systems are fundamentally different and often confused with one another. Today we welcome Jake Etheridge, Technical Sales Executive at Robotics USA, to help us untangle the confusion. We'll break down how ASRS and AMR solutions differ, where each shines, and how understanding their unique strengths can help you make the right decisions for your facility and operation. So please welcome Jake Etheridge. Jake, always great to see you. Thanks for being here today.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Michelle. How are you?
Very well, and excited to get into this conversation because we kind of just scratch the surface of what we're going to talk about, but there is some confusion here, and you are going to be able to break that all down for us. Before we hear you do that, however, can you give us a brief background for people who are not familiar with your work?
Yeah, so I am a technical sales executive at Robotics. I've been with the company for about 2 years. However, I've been in this industry for going on 8 years at this point. In the past, I used to work for a system integrator, so I would have experience selling a variety of different automated solutions, ranging from a simple stick a conveyor all the way to a goods to person solution. So, yeah, I can definitely understand where the confusion comes from. Especially if you're coming from a position where you have a fairly manual process and you're looking to dip your toes into the field of automation. All of the acronyms, especially the fact that they all start with the letter A, can be relatively confusing. So happy to help.
So let's start there. Can you explain the fundamental differences with that confusion, as you said, and there's a couple different factors playing into that, but what's the main difference or differences between automated storage and retrieval systems, ASRS, and autonomous mobile robots, or AMRs?
Yeah, absolutely. So let's start off with the similarities first, right? So both can assist in order picks or like order picking and delivering goods. They can both impact your workflows in a positive manner. They do both require some form of infrastructure check. Like for instance, the flooring has to be in a relatively decent condition for the robot to travel across. And a lot of times, like, a robot can't necessarily go into a freezer due to condensation that would, come onto the camera. So, there are going to be some environmental similarities that we have to take into consideration. And both of them are typically just a piece of the puzzle, meaning that like an AMR or an ASRS isn't going to solve 100% of your business needs. It's going to be a portion of the solution. Therefore, you want to look for something that is going to be able to work with other technologies out in the field. And we'll talk about this a little later, but an ASRS and an AMR can actually work together to really benefit you in your business. I guess from a differentiation standpoint, what we want to look at for an ASRS is typically a solution that is confined within like a certain footprint. So, there's really no human interaction. There's typically a fence involved, or, there's a physical barrier preventing a human being from going into the field where the robots operate. An ASRS, they typically will increase your storage density by a significant amount because of the fact that there's no human interaction. You can have robots just travel along their dedicated paths. We can also increase the height of storage within inside of an ASRS system because they are traveling along their own dedicated paths. Many of them can travel up into the storage solution, or they're extremely tall robots to begin with. Some people may be thinking about the original OG ASRS, which is a crane style system where it's a rail on the roof or like near your ceiling and a rail on the floor, and it travels back and forth down the aisle, and you have a picker that just kind of travels up and down and grabs it and then makes a delivery at the end of the aisle. We've come a long way since that type of ASRS. Now we have technologies that allow you to exit that aisle and go down and forth. That's essentially an ASRS, right? If I had to boil it back down, it's a enclosed solution that increases storage density and allows you to maximize the height at which that technology can support. It will, on its own, find product and bring it to a person. An AMR, on the other hand, these are typically like human-assisted robots, or like they exist to assist a human. So think about, if you're in a position where you have a fairly manual process and, you have a cart-based paper picking solution for your operations, and you want to throw some form of technology into it. An AMR is simply a robot that would, potentially follow you or meet you at a destination, and it will allow you to just simply place product on it, and then it will go to another location, right? But, in essence, an AMR is going to freely travel within the same space as a human would. They will work alongside and support whatever the human is doing, and they can do a variety of other tasks other than just storing product and retrieving it, like the ASRS. I hope that kind of clears up a little bit of the differentiations between the two.
So you touched on the example of the freezer, and I want to dive a little deeper. Maybe not specifically that example, but can you give us maybe more specific scenarios where an ASRS would be more beneficial than an AMR, and vice versa?
So let's talk about the freezer for instance, right? The ASRS, a good example would be, we want to pretty much eliminate the human being from being within inside of that space, right? So if I have product stored and like in a freezer, I don't necessarily want employees hanging out in a freezer all day. That's going to get pretty tough. So ideally, we would want an ASRS to be able to find product within inside of that space and then deliver it to someone who is in a little bit more of a suitable environment, right? Like just standard room temperature. This can be done with an ASRS because there is no human intervention. You give it a task, it's going to go find that product and it's going to deliver it. I would say that's really like the core benefit of the ASRS, on top of it also being a dense solution. Some can go 12 meters high, which is just around 40 feet. We can also, really reduce the number of touch points because, that person isn't going to have to travel around to get that product delivered to them. That's really the goal with an ASRS, is to completely eliminate the walking aspect within a picking process. The downside of an ASRS is a lot of times it takes time to design these solutions and ensure that your processes are going to be coherent with the technology, and also just to validate that your product can also fit with inside of these technologies. They don't have a lot of flexibility. We're starting to see some technologies come out on the market now that can handle relatively large tote sizes, such as like an 800 by 600 millimeter tote. But, a lot of technologies out there, kind of have a maximum size of 600 by 400 millimeter footprint. And so you're going to have some limitations with ASRSs, that you may not have with an AMR, right? So, again, the benefit with an ASRS, dense storage, no human, intervention with inside that space. If the goal is to really kind of increase your throughput with, minimal touch points, that's the direction you want to go. if you have a current process and you're looking for a quick deployment on technology, or you have, some pretty odd product that can't necessarily fit within the confines of an ASRS, an AMR might be a phenomenal option. There are technologies out there that exist from an AMR standpoint that can handle a pipe that's 10, 20 feet long, right? We see companies out there who can customize an AMR to do a wide variety of tasks, from delivering product to a manufacturing cell within the side of a manufacturing facility, or simply following somebody around in a historical cart-based solution that's a very cost-effective and quick deployment. And when I mean quick, I mean getting it installed within 1 to 2 months. Having an entire fleet in your facility, now supporting your team, making it more ergonomic, and all at a very very cost-effective price point, and it done very quick. So I'd say that if you're really trying to compare the two, they're different enough to where you really got to understand your own processes and your own needs to be able to determine what is best for you.
Yeah. So here's the big question. You've talked about what each of them do, but how can businesses determine whether an ASRS or an AMR solution is the best fit for their specific needs and operations?
Yeah. I'd say if I had to boil it down to just like the bare points, an ASRS, the whole purpose of it is just to extremely simplify the picking process of product, so that way you can get outbound orders together and out the door. And then one thing that I haven't touched on yet in this is another benefit of an ASRS is that it can increase your security of your product. So, I'd say that all of these will lead to an ROI, right? More product in the same square footage, more throughput in the same square footage, less FTEs to do the picking processes. And on top of that, security, which that's kind of hard to quantify. But, if you are in a distributor of high valued electronics or high value goods, that might be fairly important for you.
So you mentioned ROI. And of course, businesses, it's all about the bottom line, right? We're here to do business better. Can you discuss some real world examples where ASRS and AMR technologies have really come together to amplify operational efficiency, which therefore would help that bottom line?
Yeah. I think if you're looking at leveraging both technologies as part of your solution, one thing that I have seen is we have a project that we're working on where the customer has a goods to person solution, or an ASRS solution, where totes and pallets are managed within inside of a field, and the robots will receive orders and then find the product with the side of the storage, bring it over to a person, and then that person will take that product, place it into the outbound order, and once that package is complete, they will slowly build a pallet of completed orders. And so that entire process where he's standing there and having totes delivered to him, that is going to be your ASRS system operating in its purpose, right? It's preventing that person from having to walk around and find all that product. But once that pallet is built, that pallet now has to go to a staging area, and that can be fairly complicated because that can't be within inside of a closed surface. 4 trucks have to drive through there. You have people walking through there to get to the workstations. There's a lot of human traffic inside of or a lot of human traffic between these workstations where this pallet's being built and where it's going to need to go. So there's actually AMRs that will grab the pallet, once it's done being built, and it will travel over to an area and drop it off on a conveyor. It'll go down to an automatic pallet wrapper, and that pallet will get wrapped, and then it will get picked up by an AMR again, and then it will travel to a location and place it on conveyor. And that conveyor line will be for a shipper, for a shipping lane. So that way, when a truck arrives later, the forklift driver only has to go to the other end of that conveyor and just pick up pallets and place it onto the truck. So they've, essentially automated the entire picking process, with the exception of taking product out of a storage bin, putting it into the outbound shipper, packing it up, placing it on a pallet. That's human work. And then the only other human work is driving a forklift to pick it up and place it in a truck. Everything else automated, either by an ASRS or an AMR.
So let's wrap up here then. Do you have any advice for business leaders or decision makers who are considering the transition to automated systems in their warehouses?
Yeah. Feel free to reach out to High Robotics. We're always, down to help, help educate. I think that's probably the most important part of this business. Like I mentioned, there's a ton of acronyms out there, and if you're just now getting into the weeds of automation, we'll help you get through it all. Automation is definitely going to become more important and more cost effective, and I think the barrier to entry is only becoming more attainable for companies who haven't had the opportunity to consider it in the past. If you're looking at some of the robots or some of these robotic systems out there, I think you'd be surprised at where they're coming in at from a cost perspective. If you haven't started a conversation with a integrator who can help you through this process, reach out to one. Just look into Google. Material handling integrator is the key words that you want to use, and find one with some experience. I think you'll be surprised at the efficiencies you can gain from leveraging some form of automation.
Jake Etheridge, Technical Sales Executive at High Robotics USA. Jake, thanks for your time. Of course, it's something that we could probably talk a little bit longer on and still wouldn't be able to cover everything, right? Because it definitely is layered there. But thanks for helping us kind of set things straight with the differences, the similarities, and most importantly, if people have more questions, they do have resources there to help them. You can always go to highrobotics.com. So appreciate your time. Thanks for being here. Good to see you again.
Good to see you too.
And want to thank all of you for tuning in and listening to Higher Automation, a podcast brought to you by High Robotics. Once again, you can feel free to visit the website, highrobotics.com, for more information there, and subscribe to the podcast so you can hear more engaging conversations like the one you heard today. I'm your host, Michelle Dawn Mooney. Thanks again for joining us. We hope to connect with you on another podcast soon.